We are headed in the wrong direction. I am worried for my province. He is literally pushing us off a cliff. This is a classic socialist government overreach move.
As Premier, will you support having pipelines go through British Columbia? Some have called for the Human Rights Tribunal here in British Columbia to be abolished. Another big issue is immigration.
We cannot do this temporary foreign worker program.
BC, they decided to do a decriminalization experiment.
The decriminalization experiment was a disaster. Government is fueling them towards death. Now there's tent cities and crime around those tent cities.
Do you believe, in light of this, that land acknowledgments should be banned?
I have never said that we're here on stolen land.
You have promised that you would ban transgender surgeries for minors. Would you be willing to use the notwithstanding clause?
I'm a mother of 4. I will always move to protect children. This is where you get back to common sense in government.
Journalism and commentary 1-year anniversary.
I don't believe journalism being funded by the government is the solution.
You have to rebuild the foundation.
You have to retell the story.
Market conservative
Other news that actually matters.
I hence wanted to ask. Do you think they should answer their questions, especially if they're politically charged with?
From wokeness to safe supply to public safety issues to a property rights crisis and decolonization gone mad, there's a lot of problems in British Columbia at the hands of the province's socialist NDP Premier David Eby. Therefore, there are 5 people who are currently running to be able to be the main challenger for Eby in the upcoming provincial election for the BC Conservative Party, and one of those people is Kerry-Lynne Findlay. Kerry-Lynne Findlay is a former Pierre Poilievre Conservative MP, and she is running with decades of experience in both politics and law. I had a wide-ranging sit-down with her. We talked about a lot of very interesting issues. I asked her some tough questions. It's a must-watch interview. So without further ado, let's get to it. But first, be sure you're subscribed, hit the notification bell, and consider getting a paid channel membership because unlike the legacy media, I take $0 from the government. Kerry-Lynne Findlay, thank you so much for sitting down with me.
Thank you, Ellie. Nice to be here on a beautiful Sunday.
So you are in this race because you want to take on and defeat David Eby in a general election. What do you make overall of how he's governed British Columbia in the last few years?
I think it's a disaster. I think that he is crushing the hardworking men and women of this province. I don't believe he has a vision that is beneficial for all British Columbians. He's very ideologically driven. He's very narrow in his focus, and that just doesn't work for most of us. So yeah, I'm very concerned about my home, your home, our province. I'm very worried that he is literally pushing us off a cliff. And if we don't defeat him in the next election and get a majority government where we can actually turn 180 degrees on a lot of his policies, I think that we're going to be in a lot of trouble.
In your campaign launch video, or one of your campaign launch videos, you said you want common sense, not nonsense. Now, these are nice words. People like to hear that, obviously, but on a practical, political, everyday level, when you're in government, what does that look like to have a government focused on common sense, not nonsense?
Common sense means reasonableness, rational thought, clarity, focus, discipline, message discipline, work discipline. It means actually doing the job, not just talking the talk. And this is what British Columbians are very tired of right now. They've had enough of a government that says lofty things, says they care, says they're compassionate, and yet they're not. Their policies are hurting people. So that's what common sense looks like under a conservative government.
Right, for sure. So you've spoken out against Barry Neufeld. For people who don't know, he was a school board official here in British Columbia, and he was given a fine of $750,000 by the BC Human Rights Tribunal over his opposition to gender ideology, and you've been very staunch in defending him. In light of this, and in light of the fact that many are viewing these human rights tribunals as kangaroo courts that are making some outrageous rulings, some have called for the Human Rights Tribunal here in British Columbia to be abolished. Is that something that you think needs to happen?
No, I don't agree with that. I come from a legal background. Of course, I was a lawyer much longer than I was a politician. And I actually sat on the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal as a Stephen Harper appointee for 5 years. It's a very different tribunal. It's set up differently. It's a two-tier process. There's a Human Rights Commission and then a Human Rights Tribunal. But I did sit as a judge on that. And there are legitimate human rights complaints that sometimes need to be adjudicated. So I would not get rid of it, but I would completely realign it, because having a chair and a board of adjudicators that are so ideologically driven that they would give a life-ruining penalty to someone for speaking their mind. I believe in freedom of speech. And even if there was a legitimate human rights complaint, I don't think the tribunal should have the power to ruin someone's life with their ideological decisions. Also, interestingly, in that case, the tribunal said that not only should he pay $750,000, but that money should go to each member of the Teachers Federation in Chilliwack for loss of their dignity. That is absurd. I believe in freedom of speech. I believe in a free country. You have free people making free choices, and that we should not abuse that freedom.
Right. It's not just in the school boards that there is suppression of free speech. It's also in, other professions, including in the medical field. We have a nurse here in BC, Amy Ham, who has been under what would consider a persecution for her views. And in light of this, and in light of other cases across the country where you have medical bodies or professional bodies going after members, very famously Jordan Peterson, there are some who think that professional bodies need to be reined in because they currently have too much power. Do you have any plans to deal with regulatory bodies in BC to make sure that they have greater free speech for their members?
I do, Ellie, because look at where we're going. This NDP government under Eby is going in the opposite direction. On April 1st, they took over government control of our health professionals. We already have doctors and nurses and other health professionals saying they're leaving the province because of it. They are being so restricted in what they can and can't do, what they can and can't say, even if they think it's clinically appropriate. Government should not be running the professions that were previously self-governed. They're going to take over the legal profession soon, which obviously I have a little more knowledge of. But this is a classic socialist government overreach move to go deeper and deeper into government control. And I don't believe in that. It's not in a free society that we do these things. I would repeal those pieces of legislation. I would go back to the use of self-governing bodies. They did it to architects and engineers as well some time ago. So we've had self-governing professions for 150 plus years, and they've worked very well to protect the public, to look at things like credentials, admissions, discipline, and that's what we should go back to. I look at their nurses and doctors. During the COVID and the COVID mandates, they pushed doctors and nurses out of our healthcare system. These are professionals we badly need. We have so many British Columbians, over 1 million, who don't have a GP. And then they say, oh, maybe we'll give you a nurse practitioner. They're so overworked and understaffed, there's not enough of them. Yeah. We need to attract our intelligent, educated professionals into the province, not push them out. And this is one of many ways this NDP government is doing just that.
So you have promised that you would ban transgender surgeries for minors as premier. If you go ahead and implement that, you will very likely face a lawsuit from activist groups. similarly to what has happened in Alberta. So would you be willing to use the notwithstanding clause to put that policy into force?
If that's what it comes to, yes, I would. As adults, we can make our free choices, whatever they may be. I'm not interested in the private lives of adults. What I am concerned about is protecting our children. I'm a mother of 4. I will always move to protect children because they're the most vulnerable in our society. I certainly don't believe in marginalizing or stigmatizing kids. I strongly also believe that we must ban transgender surgeries and hormone therapies that change the trajectory of a child's life before they themselves have the ability to make those choices as adults. And this is happening in countries all over the world. It went to the UK Court of Appeal. That's why famous institutes like Tavistock were closed down. And it's in many states. And I believe it's worth fighting for.
Right. BC schools have made both national and international media in recent years for being woke. You've got the SOGI agenda. You also have teachers that have all these activist flags in their classrooms. What is your plan to deal with wokeness in BC's public schools?
I would get rid of SOGI, but I do think we need to remember that SOGI isn't actually in the curriculum. It's a teacher's resource. It's also a counselor resource. I think teachers need to get back to teaching subjects, basic subjects, math, science, true history, not revisionist history. I think we should celebrate our high points in our history as well as learn from our low points. We have a glorious history in Canada. We've made mistakes at the same time. Learn about both. Have kids get an honest education based in truth. I think that is so important. And I would like to see grades come back. They only had them in 11 and 12. Now they're in grade 10 as well. I think at least in middle school, we should have, that's grades 8 and 9 basically. I think we should have grades. So look, I went through school young. I was 2 grades ahead when I went through. And so maybe my experience was a bit unique. But if I got a C+, I wanted to know that because then I could assess myself and my parents could assess what did I need to do? What extra effort or extra research should I be doing to turn that into a B+, A+ paper or project? Our whole world as adults is one of competition in many ways. We're not all pro athletes like one of my brothers was, but we compete in many ways in life. I would like to see our kids come out of our educational system confident, competitive, whether they go into the trades or they go on in university like I did. I would like to see them have those options and feel good about what they know. Fraser Institute just did a study saying for the last 5 years we've been falling further and further behind. I think that is because we are not emphasizing our core subjects. We seem to not talk at all about financial literacy, which I think is extremely important. When you get out of grade 12, let's say you don't go on to university, maybe you're an electrician like my dad was, and you want to open up your own business, you're going to have to learn really quickly about how to do your books, how to make your remittances to government, how to figure out your costs versus your revenue. These are very basic things that we need to learn. I was self-employed as a lawyer. I was an equity partner in 2 law firms. I was running a small business. And I also ran my own sole practice at one time. The one thing they didn't teach me all through school, all through my bachelor's degree, all through law school, was the business of being in business for yourself.
Yes. Oh, yes. Me too. I just started my own business 6 months ago, and I'm filing my taxes right now. You know, the deadline's coming up, and no one ever taught me that in school. So I'm, thank goodness for ChatGPT to give me some advice on how that works.
There we go. So you see, these sorts of things would be very beneficial,
I agree,
right, to all of us if we were learning at least the basics in school.
For sure. So while I'm here in BC, I went out and I spoke to a woman who owns a condo in Richmond that is impacted by the Cowichan land claim and dispute. So you have people in British Columbia, including her, who are receiving letters that are saying that their private property, which they purchased and have invested money in, could be put into question. I think this is the biggest political or biggest story in BC right now. What is your plan to deal with this? Because from what I know, it's not just Richmond and Cowichan. There could be a lot more.
Absolutely. Who are those letters coming from? Did she tell you?
The one that I saw was from the city of Richmond.
Okay. Unbelievable, really, that we should be in this position. And we are squarely in this position because of this NDP government, but also the earlier BC Liberals, because they all voted unanimously to bring DRIPA into our legislation. And just to talk about that first for a sec, I heard Peter Millibar say in the debate, and I've heard him say before, well, the NDP kind of lied to us. They told us it was just aspirational. You are voted in to be a legislator. You are supposed to read the bills, debate the bills, and then make your choices on your vote with respect to those bills. Nobody puts just aspiration in legislation. If you do that, you are making it the law. And in Canada, we have the rule of law. You have a judge in the Cowichan decision, and it affects our whole province. Even though the place that case was heard was Richmond, it's a BC Supreme Court decision. So that means it applies to our whole province unless it's changed through legislation or appeal process. That is the only way. The judge said very clearly that neither the federal government nor the provincial government provided any evidence nor took any position with respect to the supremacy of the land title system. And yet, we've had this system in place here since 1861. I looked it up. And we've had the current legislation since 1979. What some people are just starting to understand is that when you see the Crown in these court decisions, the Crown is the government of the day. The government of the day hires the lawyers to make the arguments and gives them the instructions, what to say, what not to say. So we have a situation in BC right now where less than 5% of our population is Indigenous, 95% is non-Indigenous, and the 95% are being told that everything you've worked for to pull together a down payment and qualify for a mortgage, which isn't easy, and pay down a mortgage, hopefully, or refinance, is all in jeopardy now. I did family law for many years. I'm a civil litigator. I do courtroom work, not criminal. And among the many areas that I practiced law in was family law. I've probably looked at more balance sheets of the average Canadian than most accountants. Because unfortunately, when a family breaks up, you have to look at the financial record. How's everyone going to cope in the new reality? The average British Columbian, their major asset is their home if they're lucky enough to own one. Maybe they have a car, maybe two cars, car and a truck. Don't have a lot of savings. 40% of British Columbians say they're $200 away from insolvency at the end of every month. We have 200,000 people in food banks each month. This is a very serious situation on affordability we have here in BC. So now if you threaten the major asset of most people, it is extremely serious. I've been on a northern tour. I've been up to Fort St. John, Prince Rupert, Smithers Terrace, Williams Lake, all over, Prince George. That everyone's worried. Everyone's talking about it. We already have appraisers doing a disclaimer on the bottom of their appraisals now of fair market value, saying subject to figuring out basically what Aboriginal governance means. I have lived this and I've litigated it because back in the 1990s when I was a young widow and then married again, I had 2 children. Then after I married, we had 2 more. So we raised 4 children together. I had bought a leasehold on Musqueam land. And I don't want to go into all the details right now, but everything changed about a year after I moved in. I no longer paid my taxes to the city of Vancouver. Now I'm paying them to Musqueam because the government said so. Then the government said, we will no longer assess your properties at fair market value. They will be assessed as though they are freeholder fee simple off reserve. Well, then your property taxes doubled, tripled, and even quadrupled. We had a dispute over a lease payment, a yearly lease payment, which had been low for the first 30 years, deliberately in the lease, with a reassessment or review after 30 years. It had been a peaceful neighborhood. I thought, well, it'll be fair. We'll have open negotiations. Right. No, instead, Musqueam sued the 75 homes that lived there, involving about 200 people. And I ended up being the litigator and being involved in being the part of that team and leading that team through the BC Supreme Court, BC Court of Appeal, all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada. We won the case. Anyone can look it up, Musqueam versus Glass, 2000. But the point is, along the way, appraisers could no longer appraise fair market value because they said, well, what is it? We've got Aboriginal governance that is undefined. We have tensions and disputes. So we can no longer say there's any market value. Then banks and lending institutions wouldn't mortgage, wouldn't let you refinance. You couldn't sell because people still need mortgages to buy. You see, this is where we're headed. And when the government in Musqueam and other bands say, well, we're not after your deed or your title, they're not after the piece of paper that has your name on it, but they can take all the equity out through their uncertainty and through taxation authorities.
Amidst all of this, land acknowledgments, which have kind of become a ritual in Canadian life, and including here in BC, they've come under increased scrutiny, especially when you have land acknowledgments that say something like unceded land or even stolen land. Do you believe, in light of this, that land acknowledgments should be banned in the BC Public Service and in BC Public Schools?
They're everywhere, as you've just pointed out. The first time I ever heard the word unceded put in, because there used to be land acknowledgements without that, was when Gregor Robertson was mayor of Vancouver. He's now a Liberal minister in the federal government. And the first time I heard it, I had a big reaction because I'm a lawyer. And unceded has legal weight. And I have never said it. Even though I served as a member of Parliament over a span of 14 years, I was there 10 years out of a span of 14, I have never said it because I don't believe it. And when I hear Ian Black and Yuri Fulmer in this race have both said on posts that I must have done it because I was a member of Parliament and I must have been told I had to, so I must have. They can't find it because I never did it, and there's no video out there of me doing it, but they're saying I must have. Well, I said in the debate, and I say it again, we always have a choice. Always have a choice. They had choices, they made their choices. I had a choice, I never did. I have said on occasion when I've been on reserve, I've said, thank you for welcoming us to your traditional territory. I think that's historically accurate.
Yeah.
But I have never said unceded, and I have never gone on at length, and I have never said that we're here on stolen land. I would like to have a conversation with my grandfathers and my great-grandfathers who first came to Canada and homesteaded in Saskatchewan, and my great-grandfather who built a home in Hamilton, Ontario that's still there. It's up for sale right now. Wish I could buy it. I wonder what that conversation would sound like to them who came here, whether you got here last year or you got here, 200 years ago or more. You were told that you had the right to come here, and you were told that you could make a life here and literally put your stake in the ground, build a home, build a life, raise a family, or build a business, whatever it is you want to do. This was the free country where you could come and do these things. And to say now that all that we've built, I'm looking out a window as we're here talking, there's magnificent buildings and there's gardens and I see trees and I see, infrastructure, street lights, pavement, whatever we have built here. Who built that? Who built our way of life now? And I would say that Indigenous history should be respected, but our collective history has to be respected too. And we're here together. We need to move forward together. I want to be a premier for all British Columbians because we all have a stake in that future. And it needs to be a vision of progress and hope and good jobs and investment in people, investment in our resource industries, investment in our infrastructure, which is crumbling, by the way, all around the province. We are headed in the wrong direction where EB thinks just spend more on government, increase the civil service by 55%. We don't have 55% better services. So what have we spent that money on?
It's a very, very good question. So in 2023, BC, they decided to do a decriminalization experiment, and all these drugs were decriminalized, and it turned out to be an absolute unmitigated disaster. This morning, Kerry-Lynne, I went on a walk to grab a coffee, and I saw in this neighborhood, which is a pretty nice neighborhood, open air drug use, and there's the downtown east side, which is just also a disaster. What would you do to clean up that mess and get the people behind this crisis the care that they need to get off the streets and integrate it back into society?
I live in the Lower Mainland, so I'm used to seeing this in the Lower Mainland, and it's a scourge, frankly, and it's very depressing. But I now have done even more traveling in the province. I've traveled this whole province in the past, but this is very recent now, and I see this problem everywhere. I see people who have been shipped to small northern communities with one-way tickets. Now there's tent cities and crime around those tent cities in very small populations, which can be even more devastating. We have to take hold of this. I personally like what I'm seeing out of the Alberta model, where they have, as a government, decided that they're going to invest in people and they're going to invest in more beds and recovery. I've been the president of a Little House Recovery Society based out of Tsawwassen, where we believed in promoting and supporting abstinence-based recovery programs. This government believes in harm reduction. The problem with that is they believe in harm reduction as an end in itself, and that should never be. We want people to get off these drugs because if they have success getting clean and sober, they can get back to their loved ones, they can get back to productive lives, they can get back to contributing to their communities and societies, not left to basically just die on our streets, which is a sign that government is fueling them towards death. This is not the way to do it. And there is no such thing as safe supply. That's some PR person's idea of making it all sound palatable. The decriminalization experiment was a disaster, and the federal Liberals went along with it, but the person who asked for it was David Eby. And he had to admit himself it was a disaster. Vending machines with hard drugs right outside our hospital doors. I mean, this is absolutely ludicrous. So I do think that the idea of getting some institutional care open again, like people have been talking about Riverview. Well, Riverview is a great big complex that was closed down over many decades and in fact finally closed down, I believe, at the end of the Gordon Campbell government that Ian Black was a minister in. And now he's proposing it be reopened, which is interesting to me because at the time, the government he served said, it was a cost-saving measure. What is the cost of emergency services? What is the cost of human lives being lost on the streets right in front of our eyes? We have costs, yes, but that is a good investment in people.
Yes.
I believe in the people of British Columbia. And so I want to see us helping and caring. We will make a difference. Will we solve it entirely? Probably not. But we can do so much better than we're doing now.
Yeah, and thank you for saying that you support reopening mental health institutions. I think that is one of the biggest mistakes we made as a society in the West, was to close down these institutions. They weren't perfect, but right now, a lot of these people, instead of getting a roof over their head, food, care, they're in the streets.
Yes.
And that's not compassion. And anyone who thinks that it's compassion, I think, has lost their minds, quite frankly. There are so many things that David Eby has done that are so bad and that could end his career. One other one is his opposition to natural resources like oil and gas, like pipelines. As Premier, will you support having pipelines go through British Columbia?
I absolutely support pipelines. I support the unleashing of our God-given resources. I didn't put copper in the ground. It's there for us to use. It's there for us to flourish with. This ideological bent of leaving BC somehow like a park, and they've also said we can't just go in and out of any park anymore, is again ridiculous. Eby said something like, well, you can build your pipeline, but then I won't let a tanker come and pick up the goods that the pipeline is delivering. We have 200 U.S. tankers a year going up and down the west coast of Vancouver Island. What is he saving us from exactly? That is demonstrable. Most of these programs have not actually shown our environment overall to be cleaner or better. Measure the outcomes. If the outcomes are there, I'll look at it. If we have programs that do not have measurable outcomes, then they need to be reviewed, repurposed, or scrapped altogether. This is where you get back to common sense in government, where taxpayer-funded projects actually work for the taxpayers. And we have gone so far away from that with Eby. Our mining sector. We have to have more certainty around our permitting process. There needs to be timelines so that people who want to invest in our province, and we're talking about big investments, know I'm going to have my answer whether this is a go-ahead, and I'm going to have it within this time frame. And it should be quick. Another thing they've done is where there's a new permit, like a permit has expired and they're renewing, the default on that goes to the government. If the government is too slow with the permitting, they can't go forward. I think the default should be to the miners and the mining companies. That's who should be able to go forward, not say, oh, gee, we took too long, I guess your project's ended. Well, that is a self-serving prophecy of defeat, and we can't do that. Also, I was told by one of the northern mayors that at the last UBC, the Union of BC Municipalities Conference they have every year, that the NDP there were referring to our pillar industries as sunset industries. Mining, forestry, agriculture, and fisheries. You go into the legislature and there's a beautiful dome with an atrium, and there's 4 pillars, literally, and that's what they represent. And if you call our natural resources sunset industries, and then you go about sunsetting them, yes, they will die. We need to bring processing back in lumber. We need to bring refining back for our oil. We have Atlantic Canada buying LNG from Australia. That's brutal. We can supply LNG to the rest of our country, to markets like Germany, Japan, Chile. They want our energy, and it's right here to export. We have Atlantic Canada buying LNG from Australia. That's brutal, as well as to use ourselves. We should be the most prosperous province in a prosperous nation, and that's where I talk about a Western alliance. If we can bring prosperity back to BC, we will take our place again within the Confederation. We can ally with Alberta and Saskatchewan. We cannot be then denied as Western Canada in how things work in government and in intergovernmental relations.
For sure. Another big issue is immigration. And I mean, that's a bit more at the federal level, but we have seen the immigration system be completely broken. We've seen lots of people come in way over the capacity. There's other provinces, and I'm thinking about the Quebec government and the Alberta government, and they are in favor of having more control over their province's immigration numbers. If you become Premier of BC, would you advocate for BC to be able to decide how many immigrants it takes in instead of that being a decision of the feds?
I absolutely would champion a bigger say in that. I'm not sure constitutionally we can take it all over, but look, Quebec demanded this a long time ago, and it was conceded to Quebec. Why are we any different? I've been in the federal government, and you have people from Quebec saying, well, we asked for it and we got it. What's stopping you? And then in the West, we go, yeah, like, what is stopping us? So what's stopping us is David Eby and an NDP mindset that is okay with our ability to deal with huge immigration numbers. They don't seem to care about that. I mean, where are the schools? Where is the housing? Yes. Where is the infrastructure to support the numbers? And I think it is very important. And I absolutely would champion this as a Conservative Premier, to have a greater say, but also not just about numbers. It's also about who. We need skilled people. We need educated people. We need more doctors and nurses. We need more healthcare professionals. Yeah. We don't, there's a joke there that if you need a doctor, you'd be faster to call an Uber. I don't know how many times I've been in an Uber or taxi and I've said, oh, where are you from, sir? What did you do in your home country? Well, I was a doctor there. I mean, I've had this experience at least half a dozen times myself. Yes. We need to get faster credentials. My GP was educated in Nigeria. He's an excellent doctor. The reason they let him come is he did a couple of years of specialization in the UK. So then they treated him as a UK doctor. But the fact is, his medical school was in Nigeria, and he's a very good doctor. We are limiting ourselves in our admissions, and now government's going to take even more control over that, which is not the way to go. So I believe this is something we have to do, and we have to look at who's coming in, what their skills are, how it works into our job market. And we cannot do this temporary foreign worker program where we have 17 to 20% unemployment among our Canadian youth, and yet temporary foreign workers are being subsidized and brought in. We need to bring in people where there are skill gaps. And we also, back to education, need to be training our Canadians, whether it's in the trades or, as I say, going on in school, where we favor Canadians and Canadian-born in terms of their ability to move forward.
For sure. So BC politics has changed in the last few years, because for a very long time you had the NDP and you had the BC Liberals, and the Conservatives, people who are conservative would be in the BC Liberals. It was considered the Free Enterprise Coalition. So you the pro-business people, they kind of all united against the socialists, basically. But in the last election, we saw the BC Liberal Party under Kevin Falcon, which had rebranded as BC United and was a very, very woke party. We saw them basically disappear, and we saw the BC Conservatives, which were a very small party, basically grow very significantly, and they almost formed government. Yeah. Why do you think the BC Liberal and BC United failed?
I supported BC Liberals at one point. I certainly donated a few times because they were our coalition alternative to the BC NDP, who I've never voted for and never donated to. And what happened with the coalition is it fractured. It fractured because those of us who are conservative saw this BC Liberal Party going more and more towards supporting the NDP or not vigorously opposing the NDP in a way that a conservative government would. So then they rebranded. We have a failed BC Liberal Party. They rebranded into the BC United, and that failed. It failed for the same reasons, however. It failed because they started voting for SOGI and DRIPA, and they condemned the Freedom Convoy, and they voted to support the NDP handling of COVID. You couldn't find something to criticize as an opposition party in the way the NDP handled COVID, the lockdowns and mandates, the shaming of people, the pushing out of our healthcare professionals. This is untenable. So you saw the rise of BC Conservatives, I believe, not because there weren't Conservatives there who were active in politics and cared. You saw the vehicle that they were voting through fail them. Now, thankfully, we have the BC Conservative Party in its resurrected form. But, you know, there were lots of long-time Conservatives working very hard in that party before that recent reemergence. I spoke at their 2020 AGM as a Conservative member of Parliament, speaking to Conservatives. There were people on my federal EDA on their executive. I also remember attending a Christmas function, I think it was in 2018. So it's not like they weren't around. It's just that they didn't have the vehicle yet. And of course, the BC Liberals and BC United were actively fighting against BC Conservatives because they didn't want a vote split. I understand they're working in their own self-interest, but they abandoned Conservatives. Conservatives didn't abandon them. Now here, I say to people, if you voted BC Liberal like I did, if you donated to BC Liberals, you're more than welcome to be in our big team now. What we want to see is good governance, competence, clarity. We want to see an intelligent government that really cares about working men and women, that wants to restore prosperity. I want to be able to say to people, you can live in BC and have hope for the future. And I believe that is a message that will resonate with everyone. And those that are angry at the NDP, they are angry for a reason. The NDP is not working for us, not for all British Columbians. I had a fellow come up to me after the debate the other night, and he said, quickly, he says, are people who supported the NDP welcome in your, in your vision? I said, absolutely. It's not about who you voted for before. Yes. It's about who are you going to vote for now and heading into the future, and do you want to see a strong, unified, prosperous province? Or are we just going to keep bringing in no-hope budgets with 183 billion in debt and climbing, a downgrading of our credit rating for the 5th time, and a deficit of 13.3 billion in climbing? If you don't want that, then you want us, and you want me as a leader.
For sure. Let's look at your track record, because I think that, people really want the NDP to be defeated, and they want someone who can win. And obviously, you're positioning yourself as someone who can win. But I looked at your electoral record, Kerry-Lynne, and you lost in 2015. You lost a by-election in 2017, and you lost your seat in the 2025 election at a time when the Conservatives Party of Canada had their highest national popular vote.
When was that?
In 2025. So what do you say to those who are worried that, given that you have in the past been unable to win locally, that maybe would question if you're able to win at a provincial level?
Well, it's interesting the way you frame that, because you didn't talk about my wins. You talked about
you won as well, for sure.
Well, thank you for saying that. Because, look, I've never taken the easy path. I'm a fighter, and I'm strong, and I always put a strong team together. But I've never run in easy ridings, and certainly South Surrey White Rock is absolutely a swing riding and has been for many years. Didn't used to be. Back in the day, I think they even had a Reform MP. Before that, they had an NDP.
Wow. Okay.
So, but it has been a swing riding in recent years. So you're never certain going into a swing riding how you're going to do. What happened in 2025, and I'm very worried about it for my province as well, is that the NDP were directed to vote Liberal. Even Tom Mulcair said that in his national broadcast. And quite rightly, the Liberals targeted certain ridings, including mine, because I was on Pierre's leadership team as his BC advisor. I was his whip. We lost 10 ridings that had leadership people in them. 2 in Nova Scotia, 3 in Ontario, including Pierre's.
Yes.
Manitoba, and 2 in BC. And it's because they really went after our ridings with that united NDP Liberal vote. There's always been a lot of NDP in my riding, my former riding, but they never had enough votes to win any individual poll. But when they were directed, and I was told by some, we've been giving our marching orders and it's to vote Liberal this time, even though many of them had never voted Liberal. And that's what defeated us in the 2025 election in that riding. I believe they'll probably be able to get it back again because now we know what we're up against. And frankly, I think our national campaign was taken by surprise somewhat. Whether they should have been or not is an issue for others to decide. But they were. And if it were not so, Pierre Poilievre wouldn't have lost his own riding. Moving forward, this is my home. I've always advocated for BC. I've always represented BC, albeit on a national and international platforms. And I am worried for my province. The reason I have put my name forward is that I know I have the talents. I've been a caucus whip with no floor crossers, by the way, for 2.5 years with a caucus 3 times the size, made up of the same kind of mix of conservatives. And I believe I can bring the party together. I have the most MLA endorsements, by the way, which is interesting because one of my competitors is a sitting MLA, but I do have more now than he does, another one coming out tomorrow. And I believe that shows I can unify and we can present ourselves as a government in waiting. We can take on the NDP, take them on squarely, and win that election. We need a majority conservative government here so that we can actually get things done. Even the NDP have been getting the Greens or independents to come with them. I would like to see a conservative majority where we can do the people's business, do it well, and get going on day one.
My last question for you, Kerry-Lynne. Before you can have a chance to run against David Eby, you have 4 other people who you're running against to lead the party. Can you tell me why you think of the candidates you are the best for the job? And I want you to talk to me also a bit about your experience, because unlike some other politicians out there, you have a very impressive law career. You started at a very young age. You have a very impressive career as a federal MP. So how does your experience, maybe your wisdom, help you in that?
I think it is all important. And the reason I say that is because we have too much work to do and we've got to get on it right away. We do not have time for someone to figure out, how do you debate a bill? What does first, second, and third reading mean? What's the speaker's role? We don't have time. It's not an entry-level job. And I just see too much work ahead, too much organizing within the party, and then going into an election, defeating David Eby, then once we're in, getting on with the role of governance. I just know that it requires experience. There are only 2 people in this race with the type of experience needed. One was a provincial minister under the Liberals, and one is me, where I held ministerial roles and had that breadth and depth of responsibility under Stephen Harper's government. I was Parliamentary Secretary to Justice. I just talked about that. Then I was put in cabinet as Associate Minister of National Defense, which means that I understand our geopolitical situation here in British Columbia and Canada's situation in a very changing and difficult world. I also am aware of the vulnerabilities and threats from foreign governments here. I've had top-level briefings on these things. Then I was made the Minister of National Revenue. That's a big job. It's one of the biggest departments in the government. I had 55,000 employees under me in that department. And you have to achieve a high level of management skill and a high level of administrative skill, and you have to be someone who can read legislation, understand legislation. As a lawyer, I believe in the precision of language. A lot of legislation we deal with is far too ill-defined, particularly in the Indigenous space. And Indigenous land issues, by the way, were 50% of my practice at one time for about 5 years, because I helped people in other areas. I helped Indigenous people dealing with their chiefs and council. I helped other leaseholders in Kelowna and elsewhere get back to a better and more sane lease situation. So I know a lot about the most crucial areas. I've litigated it, I've lived it, I've argued it, I've championed it before. You don't want someone who's just an academic and wrote a paper about it. You don't want someone who's never actually put their name on a sign to go in and take a whole party, a whole opposition as a government in waiting and win that election. You need that experience. And I would say that whether I was running or not. Also, Mr. Black, who's the one who was a Liberal minister, that was 15 years ago. The political landscape in Canada, and particularly in British Columbia, has changed dramatically in the last 15 years, especially under David Eby. John Horgan, whose ideology I didn't agree with, he left a surplus. Eby has run through this in 4 years. Wow. That is shocking. We can do so much better. Run government efficiently. Get back to balance and surplus and prosperity. You take a saner approach to government and you unleash your resources, you bring back those good paying jobs, and it can be done.
All right. Well, Kerry-Lynne Findlay, this was a very nice conversation. So thank you so much for coming down and speaking with me today.
Thank you so very much, Ali, for the opportunity. And I hope we'll run into each other again.
For sure. Well, I hope you enjoyed our conversation. If you did, make sure you like the video, make sure you're subscribed, comment your thoughts down below. I want to know what you think. I read a lot of these comments. I'll try to get to yours. And if you want to learn more about Kerry-Lynne Findlay, there's a link to her website below. Until next time, God bless.